And welcome back into the Calling It How I See It Sports Pod. Blake Terrence here with you, Kyle Sullivan, Quentin James, my girlfriend Serena in the background producing, as always, helping us run this show. All right, let's talk some Royals, boys, as the Royals just wrapped up a series with the Astros. A tough loss today to snap their winning streak, but that's the real point here. They went on a winning streak, a 6-game winning streak. They got all the way back to 500, just fell back under today, of course, with the loss, but definitely washed away some of the bad juju they had built up over the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, here's my main question. Did they actually really play better during this streak, or did they play the Rockies? Because the offense, I guess, against the Rockies pitching staff, they did manage to score a few more runs. So I don't want to be flippant necessarily, but they kind of have reverted. I mean, they held the Astros scoreless for 18 straight innings. The first 2 games, they didn't allow a run. So that's damn impressive. They also scored a total of 4 in those games. So, I mean, the same issues that caused the losing streak are still pretty much here in the winning streak. You seeing anything either in the data or in live game action that makes you think they have turned an actual corner here? Or did the schedule just start being nicer to them?
Not even just going into a deep dive or anything here, but is this not what we have kind of anticipated of the Royals? I don't think any of us thought that they were taking a huge leap this year.
Right.
And this is kind of just modern professional sports, modern Major League Baseball with expanded playoffs. Is you can have a lot of success just being good enough to beat up on the bad teams. And Royals have kind of been the extreme of that, Got to play the White Sox all last year, propelled them to the playoffs and put them in a comfortable spot in the standings. I think we're just kind of shaping up for another year of that. And if you were to tell me, get a couple months of the year, would you rather see that the offense is struggling or the pitching is struggling? I would say I'd rather hear that the offense is struggling. Kind of right where I'd expect them to be, hovering around contention all year, not really being a real threat on paper to make a run in the playoffs, but hovering around playoff contention all year. So I think more of a product, long way of saying more of a product of playing some bad teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's valid for the Rockies, but what we did to the Astros is pretty impressive, especially from Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, a couple of veterans just going out and shoving in those matchups. That was super encouraging. Lugo going 8. I think he's kind of put the hammer down and proven that he's every bit as good as he was last year. He's still got it. So that's very encouraging. On the other side of things, I think we are approaching panic mode for this offense. We are second to last in OPS, ahead of only the White Sox, and dead last in home runs. I think we expected some struggles from the offense, but this is pretty ugly.
And
We
also, their
can't.
bottom 5, I believe, 4th worst in batting average. That was like the one thing that carried them last year is they weren't a powerful team, but they made a lot of good contact. And, Kauffman Stadium is kind of that. Like, Kauffman Stadium is actually a pretty neutral park, even slightly a hitter's park, because it lends itself not to home runs, but to good batting average because it's got a lot of ground to cover. A lot of balls should drop in. A lot of singles should turn into doubles. And we're just not seeing much. We're not seeing any of that.
Yeah. I've batting average, not the worst in the league, but certainly um,
Bottom 5, I think.
not. Yeah, I mean, and league wide, I mean, batting average is
Down.
probably under 250 at this point. So
That's true. That's true.
I'm more concerned with the lack of any type of power. Also, we are leading the league in caught stealings, which is very concerning considering Garcia got caught twice all of last year. He's already been caught 5 times stealing this year.
Well, him and Bobby have
Bobby
just
Witt
flipped
also has
roles.
not been that effective on the base paths. So there's really been no consistent path to scoring runs for this team. And I think that's a huge problem that I mean, I don't know how you address it. I think to a certain extent, they're just going to have to roll with it and see if some of these guys can start heating up. But that's definitely, I think we're close to panic mode on the offensive side.
All right. Well, that transitions us perfectly into the second topic I wanted to have here. Should we have seen this coming a little more? I think we did to an extent, like you said. Like, we knew that the offense wasn't drastically changed from last year. And I even, in our win predictions, I projected them to drop back to 84 wins from 86 last year. A lot of that was just purely based off of the statistical history of teams that make such dramatic win improvements. It's hard to really, it's hard to sustain that. And, dropping from 86 to 84 is not a bad season. It's just what the statistics say is likely to happen. But that was the other reason I said that is I didn't necessarily think that this team's biggest weakness had been significantly upgraded. But I also think there is part of me now that feels like because I was already underwhelmed by the lack of change on offense, that I might have been I might have not have been willing to fully dissect that it could be even worse because there's a lot of things that tell you that this was possible, right? Like first, like the biggest one, honestly, being that even by Bobby Witt Jr. standards, there's a real chance last year was his career year. I mean, he had basically a 10-WAR season. That, even for a Hall of Fame player, could be one of the best years of their career. So they didn't really do anything that would make them less reliant on him. They basically needed him to do it all again. And then there's even underlying things like, we'll focus on Vinny Pascuantino for a second, just because he did hit a home run this weekend, but he's probably off to the roughest of the starts of the guys we really expected much from. I think there was a bit of counting stats shielding him last year because if you look at some of his underlying stats, and I mean underlying, it's basically the surface stats really. But like I think he was propped up by things like the RBIs, which is in turn propped up by the fact that he hit like over 350 with runners in scoring position. But his overall line was like 253 with an OPS around 750. That on a good offensive team is a 5-6 hole hitter, not a 3. That is not an elite hitter, but he concentrated his production into greater run production, I guess. He concentrated his good at bats into run production times with guys in scoring position, which I don't necessarily think that situational hitting is all luck. I think there can be strategy that you can use to, like, I don't think it's necessarily just a freaky coincidence that he led the league in sacrifice flies, but I do think it's a freaky coincidence that he led the league by like 2 or 3 while still missing the last month of the season. I think it is a bit of a freaky coincidence that he hit 100 points better with runners in scoring position than his baseline. And so really the point here is not to crap on Vinny. I think he is going to be fine ultimately, but fine, not a true middle of the order bat because frankly, his best season has been his rookie year. Unless you were just like Paul Skeens last year, like maybe Paul Skeens can still have a hell of a career while his rookie year was his best because nobody had the book on him and he was just so ridiculously good. Vinny didn't start out in the clouds. He started out as a on-base threat with some power, and he's kind of slowly declined a little bit each year. 23, of course, missed most of that year with injury, but then last year, his hard hit rate was down from 22. His walk rate was down. His chase rate was up. But again, he hid all that. He disguised all that by being a good run producer, by producing just at an extreme outlier level in certain situations. So, I think factors like that, I honestly think I kind of overlooked that. I feel like there should have been more red flags that even though last year wasn't great, not only did they not make it better, by virtue of the laws of probability, it actually could get a lot worse. Because, again, you're relying on Bobby to be MVP caliber. You're relying on guys hitting at their best in the right situations, which at least Bobby should be an MVP caliber player for the foreseeable future. But you don't bank on guys hitting 350 with runners in scoring position again. I do think there could be some, like whether it's fatigue because we already knew the rest of the offense was a problem, or just, wanting to think that good things don't come to an end. I honestly think there were some warning signs. What about you guys?
I think I'm glad you've hopped on this train with me. I have the least Royals knowledge probably of this trio, but I know in our season preview, that's one I hit on where I think fans are wanting Vinny to be better than he is. I think he's, like you said, he's a fine player. They kind of talk about him sometimes like he's a 22 or 23-year-old prospect, some of the media verbiage. And I think he's generous with his time with the media. He gives some fun little, peeks into his life on social media.
Relatable. Yeah.
Yeah, very very much every man, I guess, is how, if you will. But I think, yeah, as a player, he's just, he's been fine, and that's kind of is what it is. I don't want to overreact too much to 1 month of the season either. Like I said, if you made me pick between the two, there's, is this finally the age cliff for Salvi? Maybe does he kind of start to go back to the average? I do have hopes that Jonathan India, that he kind of gets in a little bit of a rhythm. If you're going to look for one bright spot on averages where you figure things are to even out and get a little better, but that's the biggest thing. I don't think the offense can sustain to be this bad. Famous last words, never say it can't get worse. But yeah, if you made me pick between the two struggles, I guess this were the pitching. If that pitching was even performing, I don't know, 65, 70% of what they are right now, I think we'd be punting on the season almost already. Is
Oh
like,
yeah.
is this even going to be it? So that's give me the pitching. Let us at least pretend we're going to make the playoffs. Give us that feel that we're going to make the playoffs so we can make it into Chiefs training camp with some good entertainment. Other than Sky Moore, will he make the roster storylines?
I thought we promised we weren't going to bring up his name on this pod.
You did, which you haven't said it yet, so.
I don't disagree with anything you guys said about Vinny. I think he's grown into what he is at this point. One note, he is leading the team in RBIs and he's on pace to hit close to 100 again. So I do think that
True.
is a skill that he has in his toolkit, even if it doesn't his OPS is not up there with the stars of the sport. He still has a knack for driving in runs. I don't think that should be undervalued. But he's probably not even in the top 5 of my concerns for this offense, because if he does what he normally does and he were hitting 6th or 7th, you would be over the moon happy. He'd probably have 24, 25 RBIs if this was a competent offense. Problem is nobody else gets on base, nobody else drives in runs. When it's just him and Bobby trying to carry this whole offense, it's not going to work because he's not that type of player. And that's despite, we've seen some relative bright spots from guys like Michael Garcia and Drew Waters.
Mm-hmm.
They've both been really good outside of base running thus far, but the other guys that you were kind of counting on to be everyday players like Massey has been really bad. Hunter Renfroe has been one of the worst everyday players in baseball. Feels like we always have one of those
Massey has
guys.
definitively been worse than Renfro at this point. I don't know if you even realize that, because it's kind of
I
like
don't know. Blake, you can't appreciate seeing Hunter Renfroe play defense, but I literally saw him the other day and I thought we'd sent Salvi out to right field. Like, he is another level of incompetent in the corner outfield. It's pretty incredible.
I have heard. I am well aware of his. He honestly, it was his arm that was his calling card the whole time. Like even before the season last year, everybody was like, "Yeah, that's not going to be a great outfield defense with him out
Problem
there."
is you got to get to the ball before you can throw it.
That's yeah, exactly. And then you gotta not chase the ball behind the wall and turn a double into a triple like a goof. Like
I mean, but Kyle brought up Salvi's struggles. Jonathan India, about the only thing he's done this year is draw a walk. Beyond that, he's been pretty useless. And then
Great
and
hair,
his
though.
defense is starting to become a problem too. He's botched a few in left.
And I don't know what they're doing. Like, sometimes he plays third, and sometimes Garcia plays second, and sometimes
Right?
they flip flop
Yeah,
it.
what the hell was that? Yes, I mean, hell, they won the game. But yesterday's game, you had India at third and Garcia at second. Huh?
Yeah,
India
makes
has
no
been a second
sense.
baseman his whole career. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the logic is we're trying to get him to become versatile, so we don't want him settling back into being an everyday whatever. But like, just on that one given day, Garcia has played third most of his career. India in the majors, at least in professional ball, he played like in the minors he'd played other positions, but really in the majors had only ever been a second baseman. And he's at third and Garcia's at second. I mean, Garcia
They've
did play some second last year, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what that is.
Maybe that's senior analyst Ned Yost consulting on that lineup card that day. He's in the background, still making major moves.
I think the only positive thing you can say about this offense is, as bad as it's been, we're still close to 500. If we get any type of meaningful improvement from here on out, maybe we are able to sneak into a wild card. But It's
How
been
many
ugly,
games we got?
folks.
The question's always how many games. How many games back are we, and how many games do we have left against the White Sox? It'll be that similar
Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
and we'll do the same thing if the opponents are like, oh yeah, they're 3 back, but they've still got 8 left against the White Sox. That'll just be the ongoing same conversation we had last summer.
And they really don't appear to be dramatically improved this year either. So it might be the same. It might be the same exact thing. You're right. Um, Before we wrap up, Q, I kind of want to touch on something you said there because I agree. Like, Vinny is just the guy that I had been looking at stats and like had been thinking about, so that's why I zeroed in on him. But you make a good point there that a lot of even what I talked about, a lot of just the facts are not probably really fair to blame on him because he obviously said it very differently, but even in his off-season interview that he gave to the Kaufman Corner pod, he kind of, in his own way, if you know how to read between the lines of like how to translate professional athlete speak into our speak, he essentially admitted he was putting too much pressure on himself and trying to be a hero last year and trying to pull the ball in the air all the time. And there's still some of that residual effect this year. And that's the closest that a professional baseball player is going to come to saying, bro, besides Bobby, I'm sometimes the only dude in this fucking lineup who can hit. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, remember back to last season and how bad this offense got once he went down with injury. I
it
mean,
was awful.
we literally had no one to drive in runs. Right now, we can complain about him all we want, but he's been the most effective guy at driving in runs so far. So you're gonna need to find somebody else who can consistently get on base, drive in runs. I
That's
mean,
just a product of where he hits in the lineup, though, too.
What's
that's
that?
part of it.
Probably part. I mean, I'm not advocating that we boot him out. I mean, who are you who are you sliding in there? I'm not. There's no one that you're just dying to, put in that spot. But
Well,
just
and even
playing
if Jack
devil's
Caglione
advocate,
comes up
yeah,
tomorrow, it's not Vinny he's replacing.
yeah.
So, but honestly, the other thing about that is it ties back in to one of the things I gave that I want to see from the organization, which we should delve into some research and we could talk about the minor leagues when they've had a little more of the season this year. But I talked about needing to see more steps, more progress, more consistency from the offense all up and down the organization this year. And Vinny is honestly a perfect test case for that because, like I said, he's heading in the wrong direction. Like, even last year, when, like, his stats in terms of, like, RBIs and wins above replacement were better because the team was better, but his best year in terms of his individual metrics was his rookie year in 22. Didn't play much in 23. Last year, again, outsized production kind of hit a lot of that stuff, but a lot of the non-Bobby hitters are kind of headed in the wrong direction. Now, I did also specifically, to be fair, I did also highlight Maikel Garcia individually, and he might be turning a corner. So, it's not all doom and gloom necessarily, but that's the other reason that I felt so compelled to bring that up is we're still seeing a lot of the same problematic trends that have existed well before this year.
Yeah, I don't know that it makes sense to zoom in on him specifically when so many guys in this offense are struggling. I do think we're gonna have to look
But you
at
expect Hunter
the
Renfroe, and
coaching and yeah, but like I was saying, Massey, India, some of these other guys who you really are counting on to be spark plugs are just not
that's
doing
true.
that. And I think a
That is
lot of it
true.
goes back to coaching and development, and that's concerning.
Yeah, it's how much grace do you want to give, the new front office? A lot of similar faces in there, but my expectations for the offense just were not high coming in. Like I said, I don't mean this sounds like we're just dragging on Vinny now. I think he has a role on this team and is a good player, but I just didn't come in expecting him to save and pick up the offense once, becoming healthy. We're also 1 month into the season, but like you said, what did you expect this new front office to be able to do and develop in the minors, from one year to the next? I guess you could nitpick a few free agent signings they did or didn't make, but I guess I'm right where where the Royals thought they would be. That's kind of, right where they're at, I guess, for me.
And the other concerning thing is that like outside of Jack, there ain't much in the cupboard. So this is
No.
kind of what we're what
All right. That's going to do it for this episode. again, stay tuned to all the different social medias. I've recently launched a TikTok that's blindbase95, and I also have started dipping my toe into the Twitter Spaces world and might be hosting a few interviews for the pod on Twitter Spaces. So stay up to date and follow me there at BT Sportsman. We appreciate y'all joining us, and we will be back soon on the Calling It How I See It Sports Pod.